My name is Harper Mitchell, and I'm 29 years old. When my sister Madison's wedding invitation arrived with a handwritten note asking me to be her maid of honor, I actually cried. After years of strained conversations and growing apart, this felt like a chance to reconnect. I should have known it wouldn't be that simple. My sister always had strong opinions about my life choices, especially after I enlisted. The day before the rehearsal dinner, she cornered me in her bedroom. "You can't wear white to any of the events," Madison said, looking me up and down. "You're not pure." I nodded silently, then everything changed. Before I continue this story, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you want more stories about standing your ground when it matters most. Madison and I grew up in Fairfield, Connecticut, in a colonial house with perfect shutters and a white picket fence that my father repainted every spring. From the outside, we had the picture-perfect American family, but inside those walls, the Mitchell sisters couldn't have been more different. Madison was born 3 years before me, and from day one, she was the golden child. While I was a colicky baby who kept my parents up at night, Madison had apparently slept through the night at 2 weeks old, a story my mother never tired of telling at family gatherings. As we grew up, the differences only became more pronounced. By age 7, Madison was winning beauty pageants with her natural blonde curls and dimpled smile. She brought home straight A's, played violin in the youth orchestra, and always remembered to say, "please" and "thank you" without being prompted. My mother dressed her in frilly dresses and patent leather shoes, and Madison loved every minute of it. Then there was me. I had my father's unruly dark hair and stubborn personality. I climbed trees in my Sunday dresses, asked too many questions in church, and preferred catching frogs to playing with dolls. My report cards always had notes like "Harper is bright but needs to apply herself," or "Harper challenges authority too often." "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became the soundtrack of my childhood. Every time Madison received another award or compliment, I'd see my mother's eyes shift to me with that familiar look of disappointment. When Madison was 16 and I was 13, she was crowned Miss Teen Fairfield. I remember sitting in the audience between my beaming parents, clapping until my hands hurt as Madison glided across the stage in a sparkly blue gown, answering questions about world peace and community service with practiced perfection. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I found Madison's tiara on her dresser. I placed it on my head and studied my reflection, trying to imagine myself in her shoes. Madison caught me and could have been angry, but instead, she stood behind me and adjusted the tiara. "You could do pageants too, you know," she said, meeting my eyes in the mirror. I shook my head. "Not my thing." "Because you're afraid you wouldn't win?" "Because I don't want to be judged on how I look or how well I can pretend to care about whatever cause is trending." Madison's smile faded. "That's not fair, Harper. I do care about my platform." "I know," I said, removing the tiara. "We're just different." And we were. Throughout high school, Madison dated the captain of the debate team, maintained her 4.0 GPA, and was accepted early decision to Princeton. I got decent grades without trying too hard, spent weekends hiking alone in the woods, and dated a guy in a band that my parents hated. Madison followed the life plan our parents had outlined since birth. I questioned everything. The real breaking point came during my senior year of high school. While my classmates stressed over college applications, I was meeting with a military recruiter. I kept it secret until the papers were signed. When I finally told my family over dinner that I'd enlisted in the army, my mother dropped her fork with a clatter. "You did what?" she whispered, face pale. My father, usually so composed, knocked over his water glass. But it was Madison's reaction that cut the deepest. She looked at me with something between pity and disgust. "You're throwing your life away," she said. "All that potential, wasted." "It's not wasted," I argued. "I'll be serving my country, getting training, seeing the world." "Getting yourself killed," Madison interrupted. "Or worse." That night set the tone for the next decade of our relationship. When I left for basic training, Madison was starting her junior year at Princeton. She didn't come to see me off. My parents did, standing stiffly at the bus station, my mother dabbing at her eyes while my father awkwardly patted my shoulder. "We still love you," he said, as if I'd committed a crime rather than chosen a career path. During my deployments, Madison's communication was sporadic at best. I'd get occasional emails updating me on her life. Graduate school at Columbia, meeting Ryan, the perfect match from a family with connections and old money, her job at a prestigious marketing firm. She never asked about my experiences. It was as if acknowledging my military service would somehow make it more real, more dangerous, more disappointing. When I came home between deployments, family gatherings were tense. Madison would dominate conversations with stories about her glamorous Manhattan life, while my parents would ask carefully curated questions about my job, avoiding any mention of danger or combat. So when Madison's wedding invitation arrived with that handwritten note asking me to be her maid of honor, I was genuinely surprised. I called her immediately. "Are you sure?" I asked, after thanking her. "Of course I'm sure," Madison said, but there was a hesitation in her voice. "You're my sister. It's just, we haven't exactly been close. That's why this is important," she said. "Ryan thinks family should be central at weddings. And his family is very traditional." There it was. The real reason. Ryan's family expected a sister to be maid of honor, and Madison was doing what was expected. Still, I saw it as an opportunity to repair our relationship. I requested leave, booked my flight, and even bought a new dress for the engagement party, a simple navy blue number that I thought couldn't possibly offend anyone. I was wrong. I arrived in Connecticut 2 weeks before the wedding, settling into my old bedroom that had been converted into a home office with a pull-out couch. My mother had left a vase of fresh peonies on the desk with a card that read, "Welcome home, Harper," as if I were returning from a semester abroad rather than my third tour of duty. That first evening, Madison and Ryan hosted a dinner with his parents at the Westport Club, a place so exclusive that the building didn't even have a sign. Ryan's father, Howard, was a federal judge, and his mother, Eleanor, came from old money with a family name on buildings across New England. They greeted me with polite smiles that didn't reach their eyes, their gazes lingering a beat too long on my military short hair. "So you're in the service," Eleanor said, making it sound like I worked as a gas station attendant. "Army," I clarified. 8 years now." "How interesting," she replied, before turning to ask Madison about the floral arrangements. Ryan was pleasant enough, though in his tailored suit, and with his carefully cultivated corporate vocabulary, he seemed more like a character from a movie about Wall Street than a real person. Madison glowed beside him, laughing at all his jokes and touching his arm whenever she spoke. She seemed happy, and despite everything, that mattered to me. The real trouble began the next day at the first dress fitting. Madison had chosen a bridal boutique in Greenwich that served champagne in crystal flutes and had a 3-month waiting list. The other bridesmaids were already there when we arrived, 3 of Madison's sorority sisters and Ryan's sister Jillian. They all had the same highlighted hair, the same designer handbags, and the same way of air-kissing each other's cheeks while complimenting outfits they actually hated. "Harper," they chorused when I walked in, with the forced enthusiasm people use when greeting someone they've heard problematic things about. "Everyone, this is my sister," Madison said, as if they hadn't just used my name. "Thank you for your service," said one of the sorority sisters, Amber or Ashley. I couldn't keep them straight. "We're so glad you could get leave for this," added another. "Madison was worried you might be, deployed." I smiled tightly. "Wouldn't miss it." The bridesmaid dresses Madison had chosen were blush pink with off-shoulder necklines and chiffon overlays. When I emerged from the dressing room, Madison frowned immediately. "We need to do something about those," she said, pointing to the visible scars on my right shoulder, souvenirs from an IED that had caught our convoy. "I can wear a shawl," I offered, trying to be accommodating. "And your posture," Madison continued, as if I hadn't spoken. You stand like like a soldier. Try to look softer. And we'll need extensions for your hair. For the next hour, I stood still as the boutique staff pinned and tucked the dress, while Madison directed them to hide my flaws. The other bridesmaids watched with a mixture of embarrassment and fascination, sipping their champagne and occasionally offering unhelpful suggestions. Maybe long gloves, proposed Jillian. In June, I replied, forcing a laugh to hide my growing irritation. As the days progressed, I found myself constantly biting my tongue. I attended bridal luncheons where the conversation revolved around designer labels I'd never heard of. I sat through planning meetings where Madison agonized over the difference between blush and bashful for the table linens. I nodded politely as Eleanor explained why the ceremony absolutely couldn't include any modern elements because tradition was sacred. Through it all, I made compromises. I agreed to hair extensions. I practiced softer posture in front of my bedroom mirror. I kept my opinions to myself when Madison rejected the cake flavor I suggested because it wasn't sophisticated enough. I was determined to be the supportive sister no matter what. Then came the rehearsal dinner planning. I was helping my mother address place cards when Madison stormed into the dining room, clutching her phone. Did you tell Claire you're wearing a cream dress to the rehearsal dinner? She demanded. Claire was one of the bridesmaids, the one with the unnaturally white teeth who kept touching my arm when talking to me. It's not cream, it's ecru, I said. And it's the only nice dress I brought besides the one for the wedding. You can't wear anything close to white, Madison said. Not to the rehearsal, not to the brunch, not to any event. I put down my pen. Why not? I'm not going to upstage you in a simple dress at the rehearsal dinner. Because, Madison said, lowering her voice even though only our mother was present, you're not pure. The room went silent. Our mother suddenly became very interested in the place cards. Excuse me. I finally managed. You know what I mean, Madison continued, her cheeks flushed. White is for purity. 4. Traditional values. It wouldn't be appropriate. The implication hung in the air. According to Madison, my military service, my life choices, had somehow tainted me, made me unworthy of the color white. Later that evening, I overheard Madison and our mother talking in the kitchen. I just don't want her to embarrass us, Madison was saying. Ryan's family is very proper and Harper is so different. She's trying, Madison, our mother replied, though her defense lacked conviction. Trying isn't enough. This wedding is the most important day of my life, and everything needs to be perfect. I slipped away before they could see me, retreating to my room with a heaviness in my chest that felt like homesickness, except I was already home. That night, I lay awake wondering why I had agreed to be in this wedding at all, when it was clear that the real me wasn't welcome. After the white dress confrontation, I escaped to the local Marriott where I'd booked a room as a backup. I needed space away from my family's house, away from the constant feeling of being wrong somehow. In the anonymous quiet of the hotel room, I opened my suitcase and pulled out the garment bag I'd brought as a last resort, my Army service uniform, perfectly pressed and prepared. As I ran my fingers over the dark blue fabric, I was transported back to the day I first put it on. Basic training at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. The muggy heat that made everything stick to your skin. The drill sergeants who seemed to exist solely to point out your failings. The obstacle courses that left your muscles screaming. The friendships forged through shared suffering. I hadn't wanted the military to define me, but somewhere along the way, it had become the most honest part of who I was. My first week at basic, I'd nearly quit. The constant yelling, the physical demands, the lack of privacy. It was overwhelming. I remember calling home, hoping for encouragement. It's not too late to come back, my mother had said. Your father knows someone at Fairfield Community College. You could still enroll for fall semester. Madison had gotten on the line next. Everyone makes mistakes, Harper. There's no shame in admitting this isn't for you. But it wasn't a mistake. I hung up, dried my tears, and the next morning I ran faster, shot straighter, and stood taller than I had before. Not to prove them wrong, but to prove myself right. By graduation, I stood at attention in my first uniform, my chin held high as my drill sergeant pinned the insignia to my chest. My parents attended the ceremony, looking uncomfortable and out of place among the other proud families. Madison couldn't make it. She had a summer internship interview she couldn't reschedule. 6 months later, I was deployed to Afghanistan for the first time. Nothing in training could have fully prepared me for the reality of Kandahar province. The relentless sun. The dust that worked its way into everything. The weight of body armor in 110-degree heat. The constant vigilance that became as natural as breathing. I was assigned to a transportation unit, responsible for moving supplies through dangerous territories. We called our convoy the Dust Devils, 5 vehicles carrying everything from ammunition to medical supplies to mail from home. I drove the second truck, with Staff Sergeant Ramirez in command and Specialist Diaz handling communications. For months into deployment, on a routine supply run to a forward operating base, we hit the IED. I still remember the deafening crack, the vehicle lurching, and the world turning sideways. Through the ringing in my ears, I heard Diaz screaming. Smoke filled the cab. Something warm and wet ran down my face, blood from a gash on my forehead. Training kicked in. I pulled Diaz, who had shrapnel in his leg, from the vehicle. Ramirez was unconscious, bleeding heavily from his shoulder. As I dragged him clear, shots rang out, an ambush taking advantage of our vulnerable position. What happened next still comes to me in fragments. Taking cover behind the damaged vehicle. Returning fire while calling for backup. The searing pain when a bullet grazed my shoulder. Crawling back to the truck when the shooting paused. Retrieving the medical kit. Applying a tourniquet to Ramirez's arm. The longest 40 minutes of my life until help arrived. I spent 2 weeks in a military hospital recovering from my injuries. Ramirez lost his arm but survived. Diaz recovered fully. 2 months later, still sporting bandages, I stood at attention as a colonel pinned medals to my uniform, the Purple Heart for my wounds, and the Bronze Star with the device for valor under fire. Specialist Mitchell displayed exceptional courage and selflessness, the citation read. Her actions saved the lives of 2 fellow soldiers while disregarding her own safety. In that moment, I felt a clarity I'd never experienced before. This was purpose. This was belonging. The men and women around me didn't care about my unruly hair, or my lack of social graces, or my failure to follow conventional paths. They cared that when everything went wrong, I did what was right. I served 2 more tours after that. Rose to the rank of staff sergeant. Led my own transportation team. Mentored new soldiers. Built a life and identity that had nothing to do with being the disappointing Mitchell daughter and everything to do with being someone others could depend on when it mattered most. During those years, my uniform became more than fabric and buttons. It was a declaration of who I was and what I stood for. Courage. Integrity. Service. Looking at it now, laid out on the hotel bed, I realized something I should have known all along. I wasn't going to find acceptance by hiding who I'd become. And I was tired of trying. I checked the time. Still 3 hours before I needed to be at the church for pre-wedding preparations. I carefully hung up my uniform, took a long shower, and made a decision. I would show up as promised and do my duty as a bridesmaid. I would keep the peace through the ceremony. But I would no longer apologize for who I was or what I'd done with my life. Madison's words echoed in my mind. You're not pure. Maybe not, by her definition. But I had found something better than purity. I had found purpose. And tomorrow, one way or another, my family would finally have to see me for who I really was. The morning of Madison's wedding dawned clear and perfect, as if the weather itself was conforming to her exacting standards. I arrived at the country club at the required 7 a.m. sharp, garment bag containing my bridesmaid dress in one hand and a much heavier bag in the other. The bridal party had a dedicated suite where hair and makeup professionals were already setting up their stations. "Harper," Madison exclaimed when I entered, rushing over to hug me. Her eyes were bright with excitement, her face glowing with that pre-wedding radiance. For a moment, she was just my sister again, the girl who had taught me to ride a bike and braid my hair. "I was worried you might not come after, you know." "I said I would be here," I replied simply. The next few hours passed in a flurry of activity. I sat obediently as a stylist attached extensions to my short hair, transforming it into a cascade of loose curls that felt foreign against my neck. I closed my eyes as a makeup artist applied more products to my face than I'd used in the past year combined. I smiled politely as the other bridesmaids chatted about their dates for the wedding, their latest juice cleanses, and the drama at Jillian's spin class. So Harper, one of them, Caitlin, I'd finally learned, asked during a mimosa break, "Are you seeing anyone special?" "Not currently," I answered, taking a sip of orange juice. I'd declined the champagne, knowing I needed my wits about me today. "That's such a waste," Amber chimed in. "I bet there are tons of hot guys in the army." "There are great people," I corrected gently. "But relationships are complicated when you're deployed half the time." "I could never do what you do," Caitlin said, examining her freshly manicured nails. "Being away from civilization for so long? No Sephora, no SoulCycle, no proper coffee? It sounds like torture." I bit back the response that rose to my lips, that there were worse forms of torture than going without boutique fitness classes, and I'd seen some of them firsthand. Instead, I smiled tightly and excused myself to check my phone. As the morning progressed, Madison grew increasingly anxious, micromanaging every detail from the exact placement of hair accessories to the shade of lip gloss each bridesmaid would wear. "Harper, stand up straighter but also softer," she instructed as the photographer arrived for pre-ceremony shots. "And turn slightly to the right. That angle hides your, you know." She gestured vaguely toward my shoulder, where the scar tissue was concealed beneath makeup and fabric, but still somehow offensive to her aesthetic. I adjusted as instructed, breathing deeply through the familiar feeling of being found wanting. Just a few more hours, I told myself. Do this for Madison. Do this for peace in the family. Then came the moment that changed everything. We were lining up for the final photos before heading to the church. Madison was resplendent in her gown, a custom creation with hand-beaded lace and a cathedral train. The bridesmaids fluttered around her like butterflies in our blush pink dresses. "Wait," Madison said suddenly, her eyes fixed on my right shoulder. Despite the makeup artist's best efforts, one of my scars was becoming visible as the concealer wore off. "We need to touch that up. We can't have that showing in the church photos." Something inside me shifted, like tectonic plates that had been under pressure for years, finally slipping. "The makeup is irritating my skin," I said quietly. "Well, we need to fix it," Madison insisted, gesturing for the makeup artist. "Maybe a different product?" Or, Jillian suggested, she could just wear a wrap? "Eleanor has a beautiful pashmina that would match perfectly." They continued discussing solutions to the problem of my body as if I weren't standing right there. As if the evidence of what I'd survived was a flaw to be hidden rather than a testament to what I'd endured. "I need a minute," I said, picking up my second garment bag from where I'd stashed it in the corner of the suite. "I'll be right back." I walked to the bathroom, locked the door behind me, and leaned against it, breathing deeply the way I'd been taught to do before missions. In, 4 counts. Hold, 4 counts. Out, 4 counts. Repeat until the noise in your head quiets. Then I unzipped the garment bag and removed my Army service uniform, the dark blue jacket with my rank insignia and ribbons, the lighter blue trousers with the gold stripe down the side, the white shirt, the black tie, the polished shoes. I'd earned every element of this uniform, every ribbon, every badge, every scar that came with them. I changed slowly, methodically, the familiar routine grounding me. I secured my hair in a neat bun at the nape of my neck, removing the extensions with perhaps more force than necessary. I wiped off the excessive makeup, leaving just enough to look presentable but not painted. I straightened the ribbons and medals on my chest, the tangible symbols of service, sacrifice, and courage. In the mirror, Staff Sergeant Harper Mitchell looked back at me, confident, accomplished, and unashamed. This was who I really was. Not the dressed-up doll Madison wanted in her perfect wedding photos, but a soldier who had faced death and saved lives. "You're not pure," Madison had said. Maybe not, but I was real. And for the first time in years, I felt clean. I gathered the bridesmaid dress and remaining accessories, folded them neatly, and placed them in the now empty garment bag. Then I squared my shoulders, lifted my chin, and opened the bathroom door. The bridal suite fell silent as I stepped out. 5 pairs of eyes widened in perfect synchronization. Madison's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. "What," she finally whispered, "are you wearing?" The silence in the bridal suite was so complete I could hear the distant sound of guests arriving at the church next door. Madison set down her champagne glass with deliberate care, as if any sudden movement might shatter the fragile moment. "Harper," she said, her voice dangerously calm, "this is not the time for one of your rebellions. Go change back into your dress. Now." I stood my ground, hands clasped behind my back in parade rest, a stance so ingrained it felt like my natural posture now. "I can't do that, Madison. Can't or won't." Her voice rose slightly, color flooding her cheeks. "Both," I replied simply. The makeup was irritating my scars, and frankly, I'm tired of pretending to be someone I'm not to make everyone else comfortable. The other bridesmaids exchanged uncomfortable glances, suddenly very interested in their manicures or the contents of their clutch purses. Only Jillian moved, stepping forward to place a protective hand on Madison's arm. "It's her wedding day," Jillian hissed. "How could you be so selfish?" Before I could respond, the door to the suite opened and our mother walked in, elegant in her silver mother-of-the-bride dress. She stopped short when she saw me, her hand flying to her throat. "Harper? What's going on?" "Your daughter has decided to ruin my wedding," Madison said, tears now streaming down her face. "Look at her." Our mother looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. I saw confusion in her eyes, but also something else I couldn't quite identify. "I'm not trying to ruin anything," I said calmly. "I'm honoring my commitment to be here for Madison. I'm just doing it as myself, not as a costume version of me." "That uniform," our mother began, "is who I am," I finished for her. "I've earned every ribbon, every medal, and every scar. I won't hide them anymore." The door opened again, and this time our father entered, stopping short at the tableau before him. His eyes widened when they landed on me, and to my surprise, his posture straightened almost reflexively. "Dad," Madison appealed immediately, "tell Harper she has to change. She can't be in the wedding like that." Our father looked torn, his eyes moving from Madison's tear-streaked face to my uniform and back again. Then he did something I hadn't expected. He walked over to me, examined the ribbons on my chest, and gently touched the bronze star. "This is for valor," he said softly, almost to himself. Then he looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before, respect. "I never knew." "There's a lot you don't know," I replied quietly. "Thomas," my mother exclaimed, "this isn't the time for that. Madison is right. Harper can't be in the wedding party dressed like this. What will people think?" "They'll think my daughter served her country with honor," my father said, his voice stronger now. "And they'd be right." Madison made a sound somewhere between a sob and a scream of frustration. "This is my day. My wedding. Everything is supposed to be perfect." Just then, there was another knock, and the wedding planner poked her head in. 20 minutes until ceremony, everyone. "We need to." She trailed off, taking in the scene. "Is everything okay?" "No," Madison said firmly, wiping her tears and visibly pulling herself together. She turned to me, her expression hardening. Harper, I'm only going to say this once. Either change back into the bridesmaid dress or you're out of the wedding party. It's your choice. I had known this ultimatum was coming from the moment I put on my uniform, yet hearing it spoken aloud still felt like a physical blow. I looked at my sister, beautiful, perfect Madison, who had spent her life doing what was expected of her and expected nothing less from everyone else. I love you, Madison, I said softly, and I want to be part of your day. But I won't pretend to be someone I'm not anymore. Not even for you. Then you're not my maid of honor. Her voice was ice. You can sit with Aunt Judith and Uncle Pete in the back. The wedding planner looked like she wanted to melt into the floor. Should I rearrange the processional? Yes, Madison snapped. Jillian will be maid of honor now. Caitlin, you'll take her place, and we'll just have 4 bridesmaids instead of 5. It's fine. Everything is fine. Nothing was fine, but there was no changing course now. I nodded once, accepting her decision. I'll see you at the ceremony then, I said, gathering my things. As I reached the door, I turned back. I really do want you to have a beautiful day, Madison. I hope someday you'll understand. I didn't wait for a response, slipping out and making my way to the church. The ushers did a double take when they saw me but recovered quickly. Family of the bride? One asked. Sister of the bride, I confirmed. His eyes widened slightly, but he nodded. This way, ma'am. He led me not to the back as Madison had decreed, but to a middle pew where distant relatives were already seated. My cousin Leah, 10 years younger than me and going through her own rebellious phase, judging by her purple-streaked hair, lit up when she saw me. Harper, you look amazing, she whispered as I sat beside her. Are those real medals? They are, I replied, touched by her genuine interest. That's so cool, she said. I've been thinking about enlisting after graduation. Mom and Dad are freaking out, but I don't know. I want to do something that matters, you know. Before I could respond, the music changed, signaling the start of the ceremony. We all rose as the processional began, Ryan and his groomsmen entering from the side, followed by the now 4 bridesmaids in their blush pink dresses. Madison appeared at the back of the church on our father's arm, radiant despite the earlier drama. As they passed our pew, my father's eyes met mine briefly. There was something different there, a question, perhaps, or the beginning of understanding. Then they continued on, and Madison became Ryan's bride without once looking in my direction. During the reception line, I stayed back, not wanting to create a scene. But as guests moved into the reception hall, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned to find an older gentleman in a well-tailored suit, his posture unmistakably military despite his age. Staff Sergeant, he said, offering a crisp salute. I returned it automatically. Sir, Colonel William Hayes, retired, he introduced himself. Ryan's uncle. Couldn't help but notice your ribbons. Bronze Star with V device. Yes, sir. Kandahar Province, 2018. He nodded appreciatively. I'd like to hear that story sometime. In the meantime, would you do an old soldier the honor of sitting at my table? Unless you have other arrangements. For the first time that day, I felt a genuine smile spread across my face. I'd be honored, sir. The reception was held in the country club's grand ballroom, transformed by Madison's vision into a fairy tale setting of blush pink roses, crystal chandeliers, and tables draped in ivory linen. A string quartet played softly in the corner as guests found their assigned seats. Colonel Hayes proved to be excellent company, introducing me to his wife Clara and their adult children with the same matter-of-fact pride he might have used for his own family. I soon discovered why. Ryan's uncle had served 3 tours in Vietnam and later commanded troops during Operation Desert Storm. The military isn't just a career, he told me as we enjoyed the first course. It's a family, different from blood relations, but no less real. I nodded, throat tight with unexpected emotion. My unit felt more like home than Well, home. Clara patted my hand. Family is complicated, she said wisely. Sometimes the people who should understand us the most actually see us the least clearly. From our table near the back of the room, I had a clear view of the head table where Madison sat with Ryan, their parents, and the wedding party. She was smiling, laughing, apparently having put the morning's drama behind her. I was glad for that, at least. Despite everything, I didn't want conflict to overshadow her day. As dinner progressed, I noticed other guests casting curious glances my way. Some were openly disapproving, particularly Eleanor's friends with their pearl necklaces and judgmental whispers. Others seemed merely surprised or confused by my presence in uniform at such a formal occasion. When the plates were cleared and the band took over from the string quartet, Colonel Hayes stood and offered me his hand. "Would you honor me with a dance, Staff Sergeant Mitchell?" I hesitated. "I'm not much of a dancer, sir." "Nonsense. If you can navigate a combat zone, you can navigate a dance floor." I couldn't argue with that logic. As we moved to the dance floor, I was acutely aware of eyes following us. The Colonel was an excellent lead, guiding me through a simple waltz with military precision. "You've caused quite a stir," he observed, nodding subtly toward Eleanor, who was watching us with thinly veiled disapproval. "Not intentionally," I sighed. "I just got tired of hiding who I am." "Good for you," he said firmly. "Though I suspect your sister doesn't see it that way." As if on cue, Madison appeared at the edge of the dance floor, her expression unreadable. When the song ended, she approached us, her wedding gown rustling softly. "Uncle Bill," she greeted the Colonel with a tight smile. "I see you've met my sister." "Indeed I have," he replied warmly. "You didn't tell me she was decorated for valor." "Bronze Star and Purple Heart, quite impressive." Madison's smile faltered slightly. "Harper has always been unconventional." "Brave," the Colonel corrected gently. "The word you're looking for is brave." An awkward silence fell, broken only when Clara appeared to claim her husband for the next dance. With a respectful nod to me and a kiss on Madison's cheek, the Colonel withdrew, leaving us alone. "You seem to be enjoying yourself," Madison said, her voice carefully neutral. "Your wedding is beautiful," I offered. "You look happy." "I am. Despite everything." She glanced pointedly at my uniform. I took a deep breath. "Madison, I didn't do this to hurt you or steal attention. Not here," she interrupted, glancing around at nearby guests. "Meet me in the bridal suite in 5 minutes. We need to talk privately." Without waiting for a response, she turned and glided away, stopping to accept congratulations from guests as she passed. I waited a few moments, then made my way to the bridal suite, preparing myself for another confrontation. The suite was quiet after the noise of the reception, the afternoon light casting long shadows across the scattered evidence of the morning's preparations. Madison entered shortly after me, carefully closing the door. "You embarrassed me," she said without preamble, her voice trembling slightly. "In front of Ryan's family. In front of everyone." "That wasn't my intention." "Then what was your intention, Harper? To make some kind of statement? To prove a point?" "To be myself," I said simply. "For once, to be present as who I really am, not who everyone wants me to be." Madison laughed bitterly. "And who decided showing up in uniform was appropriate for a formal wedding? The same person who decided I wasn't pure enough to wear white," I countered, my calm beginning to fray. "You've been trying to hide who I am since I enlisted, Madison. You've been ashamed of me." "That's not fair," she protested. "I wasn't ashamed, I was scared." "Do you have any idea what it was like, waiting for the phone to ring, dreading that it might be someone telling us you were dead?" Her words caught me off guard. "What?" Madison's composure cracked, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Every time you deployed, I couldn't sleep. I had nightmares about men in uniform showing up at our parents' door. I checked the casualty lists every morning. And you seemed so cavalier about it all, like the danger didn't matter." I stared at her, seeing my sister in a new light. I didn't know. How could you? We never talk. Not really. She sank onto a nearby chair, careful of her dress. And then you came home with those medals, and suddenly Dad was looking at you with this pride he never showed for any of my achievements. Do you know how that felt? I did everything right, everything expected of me, and it was never enough to make him look at me the way he looked at you this morning. The truth of it hit me like a physical blow. All these years, I'd thought Madison looked down on my choices because they didn't fit her idea of success. I never considered she might have been jealous or scared. I'm sorry, I said softly, sitting across from her. I never meant to make you feel less valued. And I didn't wear my uniform today to steal attention or make Dad proud. I wore it because it's who I am now. Just like this wedding, this life you've built, it's who you are. Madison wiped at her tears, careful of her makeup. You know what the worst part is? Part of me has always admired your courage. Your certainty about your path. I've never been certain about anything except what other people expected from me. You've built a beautiful life, I said. One that makes you happy, I hope. She nodded slowly. I do love Ryan. And I'm good at my job. But sometimes I wonder what it would be like to make choices based on what I want, not what looks best. It's never too late to start, I offered. A small smile tugged at her lips. Says the woman who blew up her sister's wedding by changing dress codes at the last minute. I couldn't help but laugh at her unexpected humor. I guess that's one way to look at it. For a moment, we were just sisters again, the way we used to be before expectations and choices drove us apart. I still think you could have warned me, Madison said, but the edge was gone from her voice. And you could have not called me impure, I countered. She winced. I shouldn't have said that. I was stressed and taking it out on you. I know the feeling. Madison stood, smoothing her dress. We should get back. People will notice we're both missing. I nodded, rising as well. At the door, she paused and turned to me. For what it's worth. I am proud of you, Harper. Even when I don't understand your choices. And I'm proud of you, I replied honestly. Even when I don't understand your color schemes. She laughed, a genuine sound that reminded me of our childhood. Come on, soldier. I believe you owe me a dance at my wedding. We returned to the reception together, and when the band played the next song, Madison pulled me onto the dance floor where Ryan was waiting with our father. The four of us danced together, awkwardly at first, then with increasing ease as the music carried us along. Later, during his toast, my father surprised everyone, perhaps himself most of all. Today we celebrate not just the union of Madison and Ryan, but the strength of family, he said, glass raised. Madison has always been our perfect daughter, organized, dedicated, and capable of creating beauty wherever she goes. He smiled at her, then turned to where I sat. And Harper has shown us what courage looks like, both on the battlefield and off it. I'm more proud of both my daughters than I have words to express. As applause filled the room, Madison's eyes met mine across the crowd. Something had shifted between us, not healed completely, but beginning to mend. It was a start. The morning after the wedding, I came downstairs to find my parents having coffee in the kitchen. They looked up when I entered, my mother's smile tentative, my father's gaze more direct than it had been in years. Good morning, I said, pouring myself coffee from the pot. Sleep well, my father asked. Better than I expected, I admitted, sitting across from them at the kitchen table. A silence fell, not entirely uncomfortable, but heavy with unspoken words. Finally, my mother reached across the table and touched my hand. Your uniform, she said hesitantly. It's impressive. Coming from her, this was monumental. Thank you. We never really asked, my father added, about your service. About what you've done, what you've experienced. You never seemed to want to know. He nodded, accepting the gentle rebuke. We were afraid, I think. It was easier to pretend you had a normal job than to acknowledge the danger. And, my mother added softly, we didn't understand your choice. We still may not fully understand it, but we're trying." Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. It was Madison and Ryan, stopping by before leaving for their honeymoon. Despite the emotional turbulence of the previous day, Madison looked relaxed and happy, her arm linked through her new husband's. "We wanted to say goodbye before we left for Bora Bora," she explained as we gathered in the living room. The conversation flowed more easily than it had in years, touching on wedding highlights and honeymoon plans. When Ryan excused himself to take a business call, even on my honeymoon, "The office can't survive without me," Madison took the opportunity to pull me aside. "About yesterday," she began, uncharacteristically hesitant. "It's okay," I assured her. "We said what needed saying. Not everything." She took a deep breath. "I'm sorry, Harper. Not just for what I said about the white dress, but for not seeing you. The real you. For so long, I had this image of who my little sister was supposed to be, and when you chose a different path, I felt like I'd lost you somehow." "I'm still me," I said. "Just an evolved version." Madison smiled. "A braver version, according to Uncle Bill. He couldn't stop talking about you at the after-party. I think you've made a fan for life. He's a good man. Ryan's lucky to have him as an uncle. And I'm lucky to have you as a sister," Madison said, the words clearly difficult for her to say, but no less sincere for it. "Even when you're being impossibly stubborn. It runs in the family," I pointed out, and we both laughed, a small moment of genuine connection. When Madison and Ryan left for their honeymoon, something had shifted in our family dynamic. The change wasn't dramatic or complete, but it was real, a crack in the wall of misunderstanding that had separated us for so long. Over the following months, I returned to my unit with a new sense of peace. I'd stood my ground, been true to myself, and somehow, against all odds, begun to bridge the gap with my family rather than widen it. My mother started sending care packages with actual things I needed instead of the feminine products and fashion magazines she'd sent before. My father began asking real questions about my work, listening to the answers without flinching when they weren't pretty. Small steps, but meaningful ones. 6 months after the wedding, Madison came to visit me at Fort Bragg. It was her first time on a military base, and she looked comically out of place in her designer sundress and wedge heels. "This isn't what I expected," she admitted as I showed her around. "It's so normal." "What did you expect? Barbed wire and drill sergeants yelling at everyone?" "Kind of, yes," she laughed. "Movies have a lot to answer for." I introduced her to my friends, showed her where I worked, let her see the life I'd built. She asked questions I never thought she'd ask, listened to stories I never thought she'd want to hear. At dinner in my small off-base apartment, she helped me prepare a meal for some of my colleagues, fellow veterans who had served with me in Afghanistan. "I get it now," she said later as we washed dishes side by side. "Why you chose this. It's not just a job for you. These people are your family too. Different from blood relations, but no less real," I quoted Colonel Hayes. "I'm glad you found your place," Madison said sincerely. "Even if it's not the place any of us expected." That Christmas, for the first time in years, I brought a friend home for the holidays, Rachel, a fellow soldier who had no family to go home to. My parents welcomed her warmly, my father especially eager to hear her stories. Madison and Ryan joined us, bringing the news that they were expecting their first child. "We want you to be the godmother," Madison told me on Christmas Eve, after everyone else had gone to bed. "You're the strongest person I know, and I want my child to have that example in their life." I was speechless, overwhelmed by what this meant, not just the role itself, but the trust and respect it represented. On one condition, I finally managed. No making the kid wear pink if they hate it. Madison laughed. "Deal." The following spring, I was asked to speak at my old high school's career day. Standing before a group of teenagers, some of whom reminded me painfully of myself at that age, uncertain, searching, longing for purpose, I shared the most important lesson I'd learned. Your worth isn't determined by how well you fit into someone else's expectations, I told them. It's defined by your courage to live authentically, even when that's difficult. Especially when that's difficult. After my talk, a young woman approached me, eyes bright with questions. I've been thinking about enlisting, she said, but my parents are freaking out. They want me to go to college instead. College is a great path, I acknowledged. But it's not the only path. What do you want? To serve, she said simply. To be part of something bigger than myself. I recognized myself in her words, in her determined expression. It won't be easy, I warned her. Not the service itself, and sometimes not the reactions from people who don't understand your choice. Was it worth it for you? She asked. I thought about the hardships I'd faced, the physical challenges, the danger, the disconnect from my family. But I also thought about the lives I'd helped save, the purpose I'd found, and the person I'd become in the process. Without question, I replied. Because at the end of the day, the hardest battles aren't fought on foreign soil, but within ourselves and with those closest to us. Those are the victories that define us. As I finished my talk that day, looking out at the young faces before me, I thought about how far I'd come from that confused teenager who had signed enlistment papers partly out of conviction and partly out of rebellion. The uniform I wore now represented not just my service to my country, but my commitment to myself, to living honestly, bravely, and without apology. What's your story of standing up for yourself when it mattered most? Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and being true to who you are? Drop a comment below and share your experience. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you and subscribe for more stories about finding your strength in challenging situations. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, your worth is never determined by others' expectations, but by your courage to live authentically.